Welcome to another episode of the 5enses podcast. We are in studio here at C-Flections finally, and I'm your host, Robert Zinni. Today we are sitting down with Anne-Marie Ward, Republican candidate for U.S. Congress, AZ District 4. We're going to learn why she's running for office and what issues are most important to the citizens here in AZ District 4. Anne-Marie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Zinni. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, how has life been on the campaign trail?
Great. You know, we started early November, so we are coming up on 7 months of being out there on the trail, and we've done things very, very differently than a normal campaign. I was a former teacher, and then I went into business and had my own company teaching other small businesses how to plan and structure and grow as leaders. And so when I looked at the campaign, the reality of it is our goal is to become a representative who brings solutions. Well, you can't bring solutions if you don't know who the stakeholders are, what the problems are, how the people really feel. And so we threw it back to the roots of what's real representation. And I've traveled over 40,000 miles in our 7 counties in our district. And I have been everywhere from on the border down in Yuma to I've been in jails, at schools. That's how we met, was at the school. I've been in farms, mines, irrigation districts, at churches, you name it, just really listening and then tracking. Where are we at? What do we need to do as we move forward and really find out what the goals are for CD4? And it's been an interesting process to go through that because we are truly very far behind, but people are excited to see someone come forward that wants to bring us into the future.
Nice. So with the campaign trail, we also had this thing called COVID-19, right? So how has your campaign adapted? Because I'm sure you're not like knocking on people's doors or doing anything else like that. So how have you adapted your campaign?
You know, the campaign, it goes back to almost the first question of why do you choose to do something like this? Why do you ever wake up and say, I'm going to run for office? Because you see a problem and it needs to be fixed. And it was the same way when it came to COVID. We were seeing our food pantries shut down because they didn't have enough volunteers. Our seniors were staying home. We were seeing struggles in the education system, which we have talked about. And so I had a team of people all over the state, from volunteers to staff, and I said, we're going to pivot, and we are going to get out there and volunteer in essential areas and show the community that we're here to lead in good times and bad. And it was extremely eye-opening, especially when it came to food, which is just such an essential piece, as time went on, we really saw a lot of young families, a lot of young business owners come in and say, I've run out of the savings that I've had. I can't feed my kids. I've never asked for a handout before, but we don't have anything to eat. And it really puts things into perspective when you see trillions of dollars where we needed, food. We needed people to be able to, survive. We needed money to go to small businesses, to our medical resources. And we saw all this extravagant waste go to pet projects of career politicians. And it's really quite offensive. It's understandable why everyone is so upset.
And so when you're talking about like pet projects, could you give us some examples of how that bailout went to not small businesses, or we got $1,200 from the government. Thank you. But, the corporations got bailed out.
Well, and that's the sad part is you saw a lot of this money go to places it didn't need to go. My opponent said, well, I secured funding for all of the rural airports. Well, while I appreciate that we need to make sure that our transit systems have what they need, the amount of money for an airport system was extremely inconsequential, very small for what it could have done. What that same amount of money could have done for small businesses that didn't get in on the PPP loans, what it could have done for getting extra resources for our medical facilities, would have been massive. And that's the difference. My opponent doesn't even live in our district, never has. And I think when you don't know these people and you don't live with them and you don't see these small business owners as people, as human beings, and saying, you're about to lose your livelihood that you've put 10 years in, blood, sweat, and tears, it's a huge wake-up call. And so I'm often asked, what would you have done differently? Put the money where it needed to go and not spend all of the excess on pet projects. That has to end. That's an era that needs to come to an end.
Right. It's those corporate bailouts that everybody knows about that. do we need to put that money in or not? Right. So going back to transforming your campaign from, hey, I'm Emery Ward, here's my issues, please vote for me, to volunteering. What was the reception from the citizens in our district when you were volunteering?
People were so grateful, and we rarely said anything. Oftentimes didn't wear a t-shirt, didn't wear a button, and through talking to us, they'd say, well, where are you from and what are you doing here? And they'd say, wow, I can't believe you're here. And it was our goal to say, we're here to support you. We're here to listen to you, to really understand. My goal, and I say this quite a bit out on the trail, is policy needs to be bottom up and not top down. At the top, you can have all these fantastic ideas, but when the rubber meets the road, does it make sense? Is it functional? Is it practical? Is it sustainable as you move forward? And what we've seen with policy for years in America, what we've seen especially in Arizona in our district, is that it hasn't. We have the same problems that we did 10, 15. We have one problem that's 40 years old. I mean, it's just, as I travel, I think, what have these people been doing? It's time to get to work and get things done with civility and solutions in mind.
Right. Excellent. That's really refreshing to hear from your point of view as the Republican candidate for our congressional district in AZ4. And we'll get to your opponent later in the interview. So you've been born and raised here in Prescott. You are a mother. You taught here. You had your own business. So what are the motivations behind Anne-Marie Ward wanting to run and represent people in our district? Well,
and I appreciate you giving that little bit of background. I'm actually born and raised in Prescott Valley, so right next door. And so all those things in culmination, the last thing I did was I worked for the United States Senate. I actually worked in Senator McSally's office, and I covered 6 of the counties up north, 5 fully across the state, and then I picked up La Paz. And that's what really opened my eyes to the disparity between we the people, what our thoughts are, what our desires are, and then what's going on in D.C. There is such a chasm because these people don't live and interact with us. We've created or accepted this distance, and we haven't demanded productivity. And so when I looked at that, I dove in on a lot of issues, and part of my job was to interface with different bureaus and agencies and get things done. And that's all it took. Let's get it done. And I thought, if on a small scale I can do this, on a large scale with an incredible team around me and a district that's around me with people who are experts in all different fields, we can really move forward and move forward quickly. I think a lot of these problems have been campaign platforms for people in the past, and it's time to move on and say, where are we going? I mean, yesterday we watched NASA and SpaceX launch.
Right, yeah.
There's no reason why we should have a problem from the 70s. It's time to see us advance at the government level in the tradition of our forefathers, who were revolutionary at the time, to who we are now. Okay. And so when I looked at that, I said, we can do better, we will do better. And I'm going to do it. It takes one of us to stand up and say, together, let's move forward. And it's very encouraging when I travel to hear people say, and often the first question is, where do you live? They want to make sure that you live and breathe the same experiences they do. And the second question is, have you run for office before? Do you hold an office right now? And I'll say no. And after a while, I started asking, why is that your first or second question? And they would say, I'm tired of the same people. I don't want to see the same people. I want somebody who's normal, who's worked like I have, who cares about the same things I do. Where you mentioned I'm a mom, what education they're going to get, the type of health care, where are we going as a community? And it's interesting to see that is the focus of, are you one of us? Are you willing to present our issues?
Right, be a representative for the people in that district, right?
Right.
Okay. So, from your interactions with everybody on the campaign trail, what issues do you see that are the most important for this district?
Well, of course, after COVID-19, or I guess it's not totally over, but with COVID-19, what we're seeing is a major focus on economy. You know, how can we lift some of these regulations for small businesses so that they can blaze forward? How can we find new opportunities for our small businesses that they can capitalize on to make sure that our economy is strong? How can we incentivize manufacturing here in the United States to make sure that there's more job opportunities? Those are all really front and center right now. Secondary to that is a balance between healthcare and education. from the education point of view, I went all the way through the system. I have a bachelor's, master's, and a doctorate. And I know that it's unbelievably expensive. It's time consuming, and all too often it doesn't correlate to the economic realities of what jobs are out there. You know, what I've heard the most when I travel the district from businesses is we can't attract and retain people to work with us. And so we're really seeing that we have many graduates from the collegiate level who may have a $100,000 degree, but they can't get a job because it doesn't align to the workforce. And so we need to create that balance of making sure education matches what we need so that everyone wins. The community wins because we have enough people. The individual wins. They have a job that they're satisfied and fulfilled in. So we need to start bringing those two sectors together. And then when it comes to our healthcare, it's one of those areas, whether you're right, left, or otherwise, that is just a disaster from every point of view. The good part about that is that we know it's a disaster, and now it's time to, there's a silver lining in everything. We know it's time to dive in. And this is one of those areas. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals talking to private practitioners. I actually just spoke to a woman who teaches for you at UCLA, but lives here, and she teaches Medicare and Medicaid and what goes into those, the components, supplementals. And it was really interesting to look at the numbers, because you hear this debate of Medicare for all, which I'm opposed to, but I do understand the precept of having access and affordable health care. My son, he's tiny. He just went in for stitches, typical little boy. With health care insurance, $5,000 out of pocket. Families can't afford this. There is no way that you can afford this. I mean, that throws off any family. When you actually look at Medicare, most of our seniors are paying $500 a month. It doesn't cover everything. They have supplementals. They have other pieces. They're, no matter where you're at in the system, it's not working. From the hospital point of view, it's not working. From the private practitioner so we all know. And so what I've seen that's been the most innovative of how do you fix this? Well, the always the first answer, and I think we say this whenever you're teaching, is you have to get started, yep. Right? Mm-hmm. And it is seeing all these people come to the table of what do we need to do with this. And in Mojave County, they had just created a healthcare coalition that I had the opportunity to visit. And it was interesting because they had outlined, here's what we need to do. Here are some of the policy hangups. Here's what we're looking at in the insurance world. And so more forums like that is where we need to start and then move quickly. Because while all that is going on, we, the normal people down here that are parenting children or people that might have a pre-existing condition, or our seniors that are dealing with Medicare that they're being pushed from providers because there's not enough of a payout for cents on the dollar, everyone is struggling. So it needs to be at the forefront and fixed. That was a very long answer, but those are the top issues that I hear. And then it just grows from there.
No, I agree. I mean, living in this district in Prescott for 10 years, my great aunt and uncle lived here since the 70s, so I have the connection. But, if I were to have the education that I had and wanted to come here, that industry isn't here, so I get it. And, what you're saying is this county and this district be beneficial if we could find innovative ways to get those people to come back. Because it's a beautiful area. I mean, I have people all the time saying that you live in heaven, basically. I'm like, yeah, it's very beautiful living here.
It is. And it's true. The more that we have seen, I think one of the pieces I've heard highlighted the most with COVID is people saying, well, we figured out we can work remotely.
Yeah.
And that there's so many things we can do remotely. And I think that quality of life balance that we see here in Prescott and throughout the 7 counties in the district, it'll bring people in. And then you see the very specific things when you trickle down policy for Prescott, of course, we have forest mitigation and natural resources and land management. And all those are things that have to be looked at as well to make sure people do want to be here. That everything is very comprehensive in the approach.
So, juicy question, if you will. So we're getting to know you, Emery Ward, who's running for Arizona House of Representatives Congressional District 4. It's very hard to say that sometimes, especially with this mask on, So we're getting to know you, Emery Ward. For those who don't know, you're going against Representative Paul Gosar, right? And I just want to know, What should citizens know about their current representative? Because he's been in office for a very long time, and I just want to know, like, what's his track record? Why are you so passionate to try to unseat him in the primary coming in August?
That's a question that is right at the top that I get as well, is as two Republicans, what makes one better than the other? Where are your differences? And I think that personality is very subjective. And so you can say, well, I like this or that. But I always like to point to voting record and then basic things that people find to be so imperative. My opponent, as you said, has been in office for a long time. He's been in for 10 years. And I am not a believer in career politicians. I think we need constant innovation. We need people to be fired up to make change. And we don't get that when somebody sits there for so long. And so right off the bat, I think the greatest concern that I've seen the citizens in our district have with the current representative is he doesn't live here. He's never lived here. He lives in Flagstaff, and to ask for the privilege to govern a set of people and not be a part of them is absurd. People want to see you at the coffee shop. I go into Trader Joe's and I had someone say to me the other day, "You're the woman, aren't you? The one running." And I said, "Yes, I am. Okay. Let's talk, get to know me." We need to recreate that. And unfortunately, the current representative has never done that. You're not invested in the school districts. You're not invested in the healthcare system. You're not invested in what's going on here if it doesn't affect you. And we really saw that like with the airport funding. If you had been here and he was wholly absent, never appeared once in the district during the COVID crisis, if you're not here, you don't understand why those dollars should have gone to small businesses, should have gone elsewhere. Of course, it went to a pet project, and that's the opposite of what we need. When it comes to voting records specifically, it's very interesting to see that much of the speech doesn't match the action. So while he has been an ardent supporter of President Trump, he is actually in the top 11% of the GOP that continually votes against his initiatives. And so while claiming to be a supporter, he also skipped all 15 impeachment hearings. And so if you were advocating on behalf of the president, you should have probably attended a hearing, if not all 15, and you should probably be voting for these things. And it's interesting because the initiatives that he voted against, that the president spearheaded, several of them were deeply beneficial to our district. From the Support Act, which dealt with the opioid crisis, looking at what needs to happen with trade deals. I mean, these different pieces that we look at when it came to immigration, while he is very loud about what that should look like, he has missed almost every single imperative immigration vote, including Kate's Law. And so we see somebody who is a direct dichotomy of what they claim to be when it comes time to vote. We have a massive farming industry in our district. If you eat a leafy green, it probably came out of Yuma. Yuma is a $3.3 billion industry. It's one of the backbone industries of our state. It's beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go down there, it's well worth the trip. And when the Farm Bill came up, he voted no. It's a critical Arizona industry. And so whether it was Arizona Industries, law enforcement, immigration, one thing that he never even mentions on his campaign website is education. It's not even a platform.
Okay.
And so when you look at this comprehensively, whether you like the individual or not, and I personally do not agree with the type of behavior, I strongly believe in civility. We are not going to agree on anything or on everything.
Oh, anything?
We will agree
really?
on
are
something.
Sure? Okay.
We are not going to agree on everything, but we can find common ground and through civility move forward. And that is the goal. We agree we need help on education, on healthcare, on, we agree we need to eat. So what does farming look like, right?
Right.
And so all of those things together, people are ready. They're ready for a new era of let's make progress. Let's move forward. They're tired of hearing politicians scream one thing or do something crazy to get on the news that night, but then go and vote differently or not vote at all or just disappear altogether. And we've seen that for far too long in our current representative, and especially during COVID when this district was desperate to have somebody come and say, what's it like for rural Arizona? What's it like for a small business owner? Come and talk to these people. Never appeared once. They want somebody engaged that's supportive, that's saying, I'm there with you. And I want to make sure policy looks like that, because if you're not here, you can't go back to DC and fight and say, we need this or we don't need that. That's not even a reality. And that's what we're missing. So to answer your juicy question, there it all is.
Right. You gave us a perspective of our current representative, Gosar. So now I would like you to just, talk to our viewers, or at least share with the viewers what you hope to bring to the table as their representative.
One of the biggest pieces is, after spending all this time, like I said, 40,000 miles driving this district, that was my way, and of course I come from the business world and as an educator before that, of tracking who are our stakeholders, who do we need to bring together, what steps do we need to take to move forward, so that after that August 4th primary and then the general election, we can truly move forward and say, let's dive right in. So that data, that information, those people now that can come to the table, we have not seen that in years, of that approach that we would take in the business world or anywhere else of who do we need? How do we fix this? How do we identify that? When I used to coach small businesses, I would say, what are your top 3 priorities? What are our goals to meet those? How are we going to track those? You can't master what you don't measure. And so that is one of the biggest pieces, is sharing with them, I have this experience of knowing how to do this, and it's already in the works. Secondary to that is access and transparency. I strongly believe that my office should be in a very central location where it's easily accessible. It's in the forefront of people's minds to pop in, to talk, to be aware, to have offices throughout the district in places that make sense. We are most heavily populated, especially up here in the north. We have one small office currently, and then there's one in the Phoenix area. And I would like to see more things in the district that would make sense and be easier to access by citizens. And then have staff that are actively engaged and working. One thing that people are not aware of that I learned when I worked in the Senate, or not often aware of, many people that are probably aware, but as a congressional representative, you go to DC and there's plenty of work that you do there. But on the state side, staff and the representative themselves can dive in and help interface with bureaus and agencies to move things forward, whether that is BLM, EPA, FAA, you name it. They are a great resource for helping to identify grant dollars. There's all kinds of things that can be done here. Water settlements, you need that federal representation to dive in and help with these, because they are federal issues and it should be done. And as of now, after 7 months and 40,000 miles, I have really seen, the list is just long. Let's dive in on this one and this one and this one and this one. And it's time. So those would be the top pieces of, I have a plan. I want you to be engaged in a part of this plan. I want to be accessible and available to you, and to make sure that there is constantly communication of, this is what we are working on and here's where we at. Are we missing something? We have to start holding these elected leaders accountable. They work for us as employees of We the People, and we should know what they're working on and where they're at in it. Did it stop for some reason? Is it moving forward quicker than we thought? Right now, if you ask someone what they were working on at the federal level, I'd be surprised if they could give you a straight answer, and we need to change that.
Okay, excellent. So you're in it. You're in the middle of the political process, the democratic process, right? Mm-hmm. And first off, I just want to say thank you for running, because it takes a lot of courage to run for office, no matter what party you represent, mm-hmm. because you are trying to do the best for the place that you live and trying to bring the best support to that community. So I just want to say thank you and have gratitude for actually running, right? So I want to know, why is it important that people should engage into the democratic process?
It's one of those pieces where I think we've seen people step back, not intentionally, not because they're not responsible or civically minded, but we get busy with our kids, with our families, with, whatever we're doing. But the democratic process, I look at this now, and campaigns, first and foremost, are unbelievably expensive. You have a legal team that's making sure you don't go to FEC jail. You have people that are handling marketing and outreach and engagement. And then you yourself are spending all of your time and resources going and learning and doing. I look at this and it gives me both delight that we have the opportunity in this nation to do that, but also a great deal of fear, because it is such a difficult process to get into that we often say we're so fortunate. If we don't like a politician, we'll just vote them out. But look at our ballots. How often when you get your ballot do you see one person running for one spot? We don't have a selection. So then is it a truly democratic process? You know, it's amazing to say, what happens when we don't have someone else to vote for? We're always stuck. And we don't need to be in that place. So whenever I travel and people say, wow, it's great what you're doing, I say, why don't you run? You know, we have school boards, we have commissions, we have, you name it, from local, state, federal, where we need people to start diving in and engaging, because it's one thing to complain about the problems or to list them off. It's a whole nother thing to dive in or to say, join me and let's fix it. Let's be a part of this process. And it's really interesting because you can feel sometimes people saying, well, don't challenge the status quo. You're a Republican running against a Republican. We don't do that. And I say, well, of course we do that. We want our brightest and our best. We want the best of the best, which means we want a selection of candidates. We want open and public discourse and debate. My opponent would never agree to a single debate. We invited him to 5. He could pick his dates and times. It's very disappointing to see that these career politicians do not want to have the people really look at them very closely, because if they did, they would immediately dive in and get rid of them. So my strongest encouragement to people is either run, see somebody who is great or very bright in a certain area, get them to run, be engaged, because it's one thing to vote. It's another thing to have to live with the consequences of someone else voting.
Nice. Great answer. You must have been a teacher or something, right? No, I'm kidding. No,
engagement.
Engagement. No, that's awesome. So next question would be, what advice would you give someone who's looking to make a change in whether it's local, state, or federal government?
I would start with being able to answer the question yourself of why are you running? Mm-hmm. It's the first question you'll be asked, and you want to know that you're willing to give everything. It's a place where you become very vulnerable. Everything is very transparent, where you're putting your whole life out there. And so you must be extremely passionate for whatever it is that you're moving forward to do. To me, I grew up here. I look around at these communities. I know these people. My grandparents lived in Parker. My husband's from Bullhead City. I mean, we are about as entrenched in this district as you get. And you're passionate. So I would ask them, what are you passionate about? Why would you do this? And once you have that affirmed, find out what those top issues are. Go and talk to everyone to find out what needs to be fixed and how you could go about it. Because if you win, that's one thing. But if you're effective, that's the real win.
Last question. What has been the most rewarding thing for you during this process?
You know, recently we were doing some video features, and I reached out to all of these people that I met, and I said, hey, would you send me a video of why you would vote for me? And it was very open. It's for a project that we were going to work on. And when those videos came back, and seeing the impact that I had had on those people, just from showing up, from listening to them, from them taking away whatever piece connected to them. When I would go and volunteer in these communities, and they would say, wow, you showed up. You care. We're a small town. I'm from a small town. I do care. I am one of you. Seeing that gratefulness, it makes all the difference in the world. Or, hearing somebody say, I'm a Democrat, and you didn't yell at me. Those moments where we're bringing back civility. We're bringing back the American way of, we're a community all together. We're proud because of who we are, and part of who we are is how we treat one another. And so those moments and seeing those videos of people say, Anne-Marie, you have a teacher's heart, and we want to see our kids get taken care of. Or, Anne-Marie, you care about our industries, and we want to make sure that we have a livelihood. You fixed a problem that I had for 10 years because you connected me to the right person. It made me realize that all those hours, all that time on the road, on the days where someone said you shouldn't run, that it was worth it because we make differences that we're not even aware of.
Beautifully spoken. I think it's like you're talking about, it's the human interaction that sometimes we don't get, or at least that connection with our representatives, because, regardless what media people look at, it's always demoralizing or degrading on the other side. And civility is what you're basically running on. And I think we need more of that. So, Anne-Marie, it's a pleasure. And before we go, I just want you to plug where people can go find more information about your platforms. Don't forget that the Arizona primaries are August 4th.
Yes,
right?
August 4th.
So you have a couple more months of campaigning. So where can we find more information about you?
So thank you for having me, Zinni. And as he said, the primaries are on August 4th. If you are a Republican or an independent, you can vote in these primaries. So please make sure that you are watching for those. If you visit my website at www.annemarieforcongress.com, from there you can find our Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, however you consume your media. There's also a lot more information there about where I stand on the various issues. There's contact information where you can call or email me. You can email me directly at annemarieforcongress.com. Ask any questions that you might have. I'm happy to grab a cup of coffee. I say that I know some people aren't ready to get out yet, but if you're not, that's okay. And I'm happy to do a phone call with you. Please visit all of those resources. If you like what you see, make sure that you share those with your neighbors, share those with your friends, and I appreciate your support. It's together that we find solutions not only for Arizona, but for our nation. We're going to move forward into our great American legacy together.
Well, it was a pleasure, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Zinni.
Thank you very much. And again, this is Robert Zinni from 5enses magazine. This is another episode of our political campaign trail of 2020. For more information about our magazine and content, log on to 5ensesmag.com. Remember, we're back in print, and you can like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.